They definitely give you some pretty hardcore pills after you.
Yeah.
What happens if they actually break up? Legal, financial, and emotional fallout. The lights fade across the stadium. The cheering quiets. And a love story that once felt larger than life begins to tremble. In a world where celebrity romance fuels both headlines and economies, few relationships have carried as much cultural weight as that of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. The pairing of a global pop icon and an NFL superstar seemed destined to define a generation's idea of modern love. Music and sports intertwining, fame meeting authenticity, tenderness meeting grit. But what would really happen if that love story, so thoroughly dissected and celebrated, came to an end? The answer stretches far beyond tabloid heartbreak. It would be an event felt not only in their private lives, but across industries.
Yeah, I haven't even thought about this yet. So I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Brands and millions of hearts that have tied some piece of their own hope to theirs. Because their relationship is not just a romance, it's an ecosystem of emotion, money, legacy, and identity. To imagine it breaking is to imagine a cultural shift in real time. Since going public, Taylor and Travis have represented an almost mythic fusion of celebrity worlds. She, a global songwriter whose narrative mastery turns heartbreak into art. He, a charismatic athlete whose magnetic personality made him one of the NFL's most recognizable faces. Together, they built something far greater than a headline. They became a brand. Every sideline moment, every shared glance, every cameo in the stands was converted into viral currency. They didn't just inspire memes or gossip columns. They became part of the economic machinery of fame.
I don't really talk about that. I just
Well, why not? What's wrong with you?
Taylor's Eras Tour shattered attendance records and injected billions into local economies. Meanwhile, the Chiefs enjoyed unprecedented audience surges, particularly among women, whenever Taylor appeared at a game. Their love story didn't just capture hearts, it sold tickets, merchandise, and dreams. If that bond fractured, it would not merely register as personal pain. It would ripple through pop culture, sports marketing, and public consciousness, demanding a recalibration of how fame and affection intertwine. It would begin, as these things often do, with a whisper, a post not shared, a photo not liked, an absence noticed. The first rumor would ignite social media like dry grass catching fire. Within hours, hashtags would trend globally.
Yeah, so there's a scene marker that comes down in front of.
Commentators would speculate on motives. Talk shows would dissect body language. Fans would pore over song lyrics and outfits, searching for secret meanings and possible confirmations. The world would not wait for a statement, it would create one. In an age where silence is seen as confession, the simple act of doing nothing would be interpreted as everything. The couple that once embodied the perfect cross-industry romance would suddenly become the epicenter of a cultural storm. Taylor would be forced once again into the public spectacle of private heartbreak, a territory she knows all too well. For her, the experience would not just be emotional, it would be creative. She has always turned pain into poetry, but this would be different. Travis was not just another fleeting muse. He was part of her real, grounded life, her family circle, her story at its most human. For him, the breakup would test his resilience in a way no game ever could. He
Yeah, I think we're live music kind of people. You know?
thrives on connection, on energy, on shared joy. To lose that, under the glare of unending cameras, would be to navigate the most public loneliness imaginable. The emotional toll would be profound, yet deeply unequal in its manifestations. Taylor, accustomed to introspection, would likely seek refuge in writing, retreating into her creative process as a means of healing. Her music would evolve, no longer adolescent longing or fame-induced ache, but the pain of adult love that almost fit, but didn't. She might vanish for a time, cocooned in quiet places, the soft familiarity of Nashville, the ocean solitude of her Rhode Island estate, or the comforting circle of women who've long anchored her. Selena Gomez, Blake Lively, her mother, Andrea. The songs that would eventually emerge would not just chronicle heartbreak, they would capture emotional maturity and the melancholy of watching something real dissolve under the pressure of public
We're towards the tail end of the release week, and it's about time that I start thinking about this.
scrutiny. Travis, meanwhile, would endure a different kind of silence. The echo left when the roar of a stadium fades, and the headlines shift from adoration to pity. Every smile, every post-game interview, every small gesture would be dissected for meaning. For a man whose life is built on performance and competition, the inability to control the narrative could be its own kind of defeat. Yet both would be forced to confront the same truth. Fame magnifies love, but also magnifies loss. Beyond the emotional dimension lies the cold machinery of legality
No, it's fine.
Have I ruined the excitement you had about your bread?
and business. Though never married, their relationship has undoubtedly intersected with contractual obligations, sponsorship alignments, and brand deals. Hollywood's glossy surface conceals a labyrinth of agreements, where every public appearance, joint endorsement, or cross-promotional feature carries financial implications. When two people as marketable as Taylor and Travis align their images, it's not just romantic synergy, it's strategic capital. Disentangling that would require precision. Publicists and lawyers would quietly convene to separate rights, usage permissions, and co-branded imagery. For example, footage of Taylor attending NFL games or moments captured in documentaries may need reclearance if either party no longer consents to association. Brands that have leaned heavily into their partnership, from sportswear companies to streaming platforms, would have to rewrite campaigns and recalibrate tone. The process would be subtle but exhaustive. Breakups in celebrity ecosystems rarely end with a phone call. They end with signatures, redlined
It says starring Kitty Finley, and there's a fictional
contracts, and delicate negotiations over what can remain in the public domain. For fans, it would be seen as emotional unraveling. For the people managing their careers, it would be corporate restructuring. Financially, the consequences would reverberate in measurable ways. The Swift effect, a phenomenon already documented through her economic influence, brought tangible boosts not only to her own ventures, but to the NFL and its affiliates. Whenever she appeared on screen, television ratings soared. Merchandise sales spiked. The Chiefs brand experienced a surge among demographics previously disengaged from football. Simultaneously, Travis's personal brand flourished under the spotlight. Endorsement deals expanded, podcast viewership grew, and his recognition transcended sports.
I remember thinking about it with my wife.
That one's going to be easy. I just got to.
The union was a marketer's dream, blurring the lines between entertainment and athletics. But should that synergy dissolve, the financial pendulum would swing. Corporate partners would pivot, media narratives would rebrand, and the two public figures would be repositioned as separate entities once again. Taylor's empire, fortified by ownership of her masters and self-managed infrastructure, would continue to thrive largely unaffected. Her brand is self-contained and impervious to external volatility. For Travis, the recalibration might be more noticeable. His image as half of a cultural power couple elevated his platform beyond the football field. Without that shared narrative, maintaining the same global resonance would demand strategic reinvention. Still, he has cultivated enough authenticity to endure.
I did, but I don't
But you
usually
can see
tell
me
people
perfect. I just
that.
want to make sure, yeah.
Even if the world's fascination shifts elsewhere. As with all high-profile breakups, the media response would be relentless. Television hosts, podcast commentators, and cultural analysts would treat the separation as both gossip and sociology, examining what went wrong with pseudo-clinical precision. Old interviews would resurface, clips replayed out of context, every affectionate gesture repurposed as foreshadowing. Fan communities would fracture into factions, those who side with Taylor, those who defend Travis, and those who simply mourn what was lost. The internet would buzz with speculation, think pieces, and emotional tributes. Yet amidst that cacophony,
Because it's the first time I've thought about it.
I didn't mean to put this.
Both individuals have learned the art of silence. Taylor, having endured cycles of public persecution and rebirth, would manage the narrative through timing and control. She might disappear from view, re-emerging only when the story has softened, perhaps with new music that reframes her vulnerability as strength. The album that would follow could become a cultural touchstone, not as revenge or catharsis, but as testimony to growth and grace. For Travis, the media cycle would burn faster, but more intensely. An initial wave of sympathy and scrutiny, followed by a return to focus on his athletic performance. His best strategy, as always, would be discipline. Let the work speak when words cannot. Away from headlines, the human reality would be quieter and infinitely more painful. Behind closed doors, heartbreak follows no script. Taylor, seated at her piano at midnight,
I'm not asleep, my mind is alive.
might replay memories that the world never saw. The private laughter, the domestic rituals, the simplicity behind the spectacle. Travis might scroll through old photos, revisiting the sincerity beneath the public gaze. Their connection, though magnified by fame, was rooted in real affection. It's easy for the public to see celebrity relationships as performance, but those who've followed their story closely know there was warmth, humor, and genuine admiration between them. Losing that would not be about PR, it would be about two people grieving the end of something meaningful. And unlike the ordinary heartbreaks that fade in private, theirs would have to fade in front of millions. Yet, knowing their temperaments, it's likely they would choose discretion over spectacle. Both are known for valuing dignity. Neither would indulge in public blame. Their goodbye, if it ever came, would likely be quiet, mutual, and full of respect, a rare gesture in an industry built on exposure. For the fans, the emotional response would be seismic. Swifties, perhaps the most devoted fan community in modern pop culture, would mobilize instantly, not in outrage, but in compassion. Social media would overflow with messages of love and solidarity. Fan art, tribute videos, lyrical analyses, and late-night emotional threads would transform personal grief into collective empathy. Taylor's fans have long used her music as a mirror for their own emotional experiences. Her heartbreaks become communal lessons in resilience. A breakup of this magnitude would likely deepen that connection, reinforcing her image as an artist who turns pain into power. Travis's supporters, too, would stand by him.
Than I've ever had before. I've legitimately never been happy.
The NFL community values character and endurance, and he has shown both throughout his career. In a media environment that often demands villains, theirs might be a breakup without one. Two people who loved sincerely, tried earnestly, and parted gracefully. That in itself could redefine how audiences interpret celebrity relationships. Rather than scandal, it might evoke humanity. In the months following, the world would watch for signs of reinvention. For Taylor, endings are never just endings. They are preludes to new creative eras. Her art has always evolved in tandem with her personal metamorphoses, and this one would be no different. The music born from such a loss would likely carry the weight of maturity, less about vengeance or victimhood, more about acceptance and wisdom. It could mark the beginning of a new artistic chapter, one that explores love not as a battlefield, but as a mirror for self-understanding. For Travis, the focus would naturally return to his sport. He would reassert his narrative not as Taylor Swift's boyfriend, but as an athlete and leader in his own right, reminding the world that his legacy was never borrowed, but earned. Their paths might diverge, but both would continue upward. Proof that love, even when it doesn't last forever, can still strengthen the individuals who shared it. If such a breakup were to happen, its meaning would extend far beyond the couple themselves. It would serve as a cultural reflection on the nature of modern celebrity, how the boundaries between personal life and public image have dissolved. Their story has already challenged assumptions about fame and vulnerability, showing that even those who seem untouchable crave understanding, normalcy, and connection. The end of their relationship, should it occur, would momentarily shift the world's emotional axis, because not every love story is meant to last forever. Some are meant to teach, to inspire, to redefine the landscape they touch. The relationship between Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce has already done that. It reminded the world that celebrity romance can still carry sincerity, that fame does not extinguish the need for human connection. And if the day ever comes when they go their separate ways, it will not erase what they created. It will only evolve it. Their influence, both together and apart, has already reshaped industries, conversations, and expectations. The world may pause in collective heartbreak, but then, as always, it will move forward, guided by the songs, the stories, and the quiet resilience of two people who dared to love under the harshest light imaginable. In that way, their legacy will endure not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that even in the most public lives, love, fragile, fearless, imperfect, remains the most human story of all. In the quiet that follows the frenzy, life resumes, though never quite as it was.
Cruel enough to film it and give it to you.
Yes!
For Taylor Swift, stillness has always been the prelude to transformation. Once the headlines cool and the public's curiosity turns elsewhere, she would likely enter a phase of quiet reconstruction, that intricate process where pain slowly becomes purpose. Her private world, a carefully balanced constellation of close friendships and trusted collaborators, would draw tighter. She has spent years learning to protect her boundaries, understanding that solitude is not isolation, but preservation. In those weeks of withdrawal, she might spend long hours at her piano or notebook, translating raw emotion into melody before she even knows what it means. Her songwriting, long praised for its diaristic honesty, would inevitably absorb the contours of this experience, yet she would approach it differently now. Rather than chronicling heartbreak as devastation, she might frame it as evolution, proof of emotional courage. The art would not be about loss so much as growth, the kind of storytelling that turns vulnerability into strength. Professionally, Taylor's discipline would ensure that even emotional turbulence becomes momentum. She has built an empire that runs on autonomy. Her record label, her touring company, her film ventures, her publishing rights. Every decision funnels back to her creative independence. In the aftermath of a breakup, she would channel heartbreak into productivity, using work as both refuge and weapon. New partnerships might emerge, film collaborations, charitable initiatives, or surprise projects that demonstrate her capacity to redirect pain into action. It's likely she would keep public appearances minimal at first, letting speculation die naturally. Then, at the perfect moment, she would reappear, serene, composed, perhaps in a single unexpected performance that reframes the narrative. The audience would not simply applaud. They would exhale, relieved to see her strength embodied once more. For Travis Kelce, the rhythm of recovery would follow a different tempo. His world is structured around seasons, training schedules, and locker room camaraderie, rituals that leave little room for indulgence in despair. Yet even for a man conditioned to channel emotion into competition, heartbreak does not vanish under discipline. The first weeks would be disorienting, arriving at practice to a flood of sympathetic looks, watching his every gesture analyzed by sideline cameras, hearing his name mentioned more in entertainment segments than in sports commentary. Fame, once flattering, would momentarily feel invasive. He might retreat into the fundamentals of his sport, the routines that have always given him equilibrium. Football would become therapy, its structure a refuge from the chaos of interpretation. But beneath the uniform, he would still be processing. The quiet reckoning that comes when the adrenaline fades and memory surfaces uninvited. As months pass, Travis would begin to reassert his narrative, not through interviews but through consistency, performing well on the field, maintaining professionalism with the press, and keeping private matters private would gradually restore balance. Fans would admire his restraint. Teammates would respect his focus. Over time, the story would shift from heartbreak to resilience, Brands that once capitalized on the couple's joint appeal would adapt, spotlighting his leadership and integrity rather than his celebrity connection.
Named Kitty in The Life of a Showgirl, the song, that's just this character who...
In many ways, the breakup could accelerate his evolution from star athlete to enduring icon, someone admired not only for physical talent, but for composure under extraordinary scrutiny. When he eventually speaks about the experience, likely in measured tones and on his own terms, he would emphasize gratitude rather than regret. That graciousness would reinforce the respect he already commands in both sports and entertainment circles. Emotionally, however, neither would emerge untouched. Taylor and Travis experienced something rare. Genuine connection lived under relentless public gaze. To have loved each other sincerely, despite the scrutiny, is itself an act of bravery. Letting go would not erase affection. It would simply transform it into something quieter, more private. Friends close to them might describe an undercurrent of mutual respect that persists long after headlines fade, a refusal to let the media's appetite define what they were to each other. They might exchange brief messages of support after milestones, subtle gestures that acknowledge shared history without reigniting speculation. Both have enough maturity to recognize that endings need not be antagonistic. In that sense, their breakup could model a new kind of celebrity parting, one grounded in dignity, empathy, and emotional intelligence. For Taylor, the period following the breakup might also inspire a reevaluation of her relationship with fame itself. Having spent nearly 2 decades under microscopic attention, she understands better than anyone how public perception can warp private truth. The experience with Travis, an authentic relationship that unfolded almost as a live performance, would likely reinforce her commitment to maintaining control over her narrative. Future relationships, if any, would be guarded, perhaps invisible altogether. Yet paradoxically, this very privacy would enhance her mystique. Audiences are drawn to what they can't access. In shielding her heart more deliberately, she would reclaim a sense of normalcy that fame once denied her. The woman who once chronicled every emotional beat might now choose silence as her most powerful lyric. Travis's trajectory would mirror his own growth as a man in the spotlight. Before Taylor, his fame was largely confined to sports. Afterward, he became a cross-cultural figure. Navigating the transition back to relative normalcy would demand balance. Some of his newer followers, fans drawn from Taylor's world, might drift away, but what remains would be a core of loyal supporters who appreciate his authenticity. He might deepen his involvement in philanthropy, youth mentorship, or community initiatives, using his expanded platform for substance rather than spectacle. In doing so, he would solidify an identity independent of any relationship, ensuring that his legacy rests on personal merit. Within the NFL, his professionalism and leadership would continue to earn respect, while off the field he would become an example of grace under pressure. Meanwhile, the cultural afterglow of their relationship would persist. Even without public contact, the mythology of Taylor and Travis would endure in fan memory, a chapter in the broader narrative of 21st century celebrity love. Just as people still reference iconic couples of past decades, their story would be revisited as shorthand for an era when pop music and professional sports briefly shared the same heartbeat. Documentaries, think pieces, and retrospectives would frame it as more than gossip. It would be interpreted as a case study in how authenticity can coexist with spectacle. Their breakup would not diminish that legacy. It would complete it. Every great cultural narrative, after all, requires an ending. For Taylor, time would bring perspective. The pain that once felt like fracture would reveal itself as foundation. In interviews years later, she might speak about it with quiet gratitude, acknowledging that love, even when fleeting, had expanded her understanding of herself. Listeners would sense that maturity in her work, lyrics less about winning or losing and more about learning. She would no longer need to reclaim power because she never lost it. Each heartbreak she's endured has refined her art, but this one, marked by respect rather than betrayal, would refine her philosophy. It would teach her that sometimes strength lies not in resistance, but in acceptance. Travis, too, would emerge more centered. The experience of being part of a global media phenomenon would alter his relationship to fame. He would have seen its volatility up close, the way adoration turns invasive, the way narratives twist beyond control. That awareness would make him more deliberate about what he shares and why. In future interviews, he might speak with wisdom about privacy, perhaps even offering perspective to younger athletes suddenly thrust into the limelight. His voice would carry credibility, not just because of achievement, but because of what he endured. If handled with grace, the breakup could transform him from sports hero to cultural statesman, a man admired as much for his emotional intelligence as for his physical prowess. Eventually, as the years roll forward, the memory of their relationship would settle into its proper place, neither scandal nor spectacle, but story. When Taylor performs a song subtly inspired by that time, fans would recognize it instantly and feel nostalgia rather than sorrow. When Travis appears in documentaries or retrospectives, footage of them together would draw affectionate smiles instead of gossip. They would exist in each other's histories as reminders of a moment when love and fame briefly found equilibrium. That acknowledgement, simple, gracious, unsensational, would itself be revolutionary in a culture addicted to drama. In their separate paths, both would continue shaping the broader conversation about what it means to live authentically under public gaze. Taylor's next creative era would likely explore self-reclamation, the art of remaining whole despite constant fragmentation. Her songwriting might become more philosophical, addressing time, identity, and endurance rather than romance alone. She could experiment with new genres, collaborate with unexpected artists, even explore film or literature as mediums of storytelling. Every new project would carry the subtle imprint of what she learned from loving someone outside her industry. A reminder that her art is not just autobiography, but anthropology, documenting the ways love evolves in the modern age, and somewhere in quieter corners of their lives. The personal residue would remain, the small, unpublicized ways people remember those who once mattered deeply. A certain song might still make Taylor pause at the piano. A particular city might still make Travis smile as he steps off the team bus. Those moments of recollection would not reopen wounds. They would simply affirm that what existed was real. Love, after all, does not disappear. It changes form, from presence to memory, from touch to understanding. For two individuals who have built their lives on performance and perseverance, that understanding might be the most enduring reward.